Welcome to the Butterfly Chamber with J.R. McDonald. The thoughts and views expressed on this episode of the Butterfly Chamber does not reflect the views of any organization with which the hosts or guests may be affiliated with.
Hey, welcome to the Butterfly Chamber. I am J.R. McDonald, and you are back to episode 3, or you're here for the first time, whatever it may be. You are on the porch. You are here with family, friends that have become family, all that good stuff. And I'm just elated because the first 2 episodes have been received so well. Had a great opportunity to talk with Christian, the winner of Wheel of Fortune. Had another opportunity to connect in with Rasheed Thomas and learn some lessons for the urban leader. And this episode is going to be another treat for you. And I am elated because I have the opportunity to talk with one of my good friends and experts as it relates to his field of study in organizational behavior, and author, podcast host of the Access Point. And I was actually on an episode of it this season, and that was so exciting. And also, he's just an all-around awesome person. I've had the best opportunity in life of meeting him and meeting someone that's close to him and being in relationship for almost a decade now. And it's great when you can have friends that you can connect in with on a personal level, but then also have the opportunity to build with in professional sectors and see how that you can continue to support each other. And that is none other than Dr. Lonnie Morris Jr. And I'm going to put the junior on there because I'm a junior too. And I was like, what? Go ahead on junior. What is up, Dr. Lonnie?
What's happening, JR? Yeah, junior is important, man. I found some ways when I was connected to my dad I didn't know at the bank. And they said, this is not your money. I said, wait. Got to use junior all the time. Yeah, very important.
I'm glad Dad probably like, yeah, please use that.
Very important.
Yes. So thank you for being on. I feel like we are returning the favor, but I truly appreciate having you on this episode on my first season of the Butterfly Chamber. Here, this is where we embrace our cocoon phase. I feel like, we develop sometimes alone and in darkness, as we are going out to live our life out loud, and some things, we may not have the privilege to do in our cocoon space. And we do it here publicly on podcast or whatever platforms we may have. But I kind of want to tap in first with, giving you the opportunity to tell the audience who you are. Who is Dr. Lonnie Morris Jr.?
That's a great question. And I think that the timing of this sort of resonates, particularly as we're coming out of, the second week of Wakanda Forever. And we know that in that film, right, identifying who you are is very important for the community and for longevity of the legends in that series. So I think here's how I describe myself now. So first, most people don't know this, I am a caregiver. So I take care of my 92-year-old great aunt.
Wow.
My grandmother's aunt. So
yes.
My family for a very long time, and I
what
honor
a huge
that.
Undertaking.
It's a huge undertaking. So I honor that, and I'm not as public with that. So our times are private and special. So that. But on the other side, I guess that's becoming sort of a pseudo profession for me as well, and understand what that means to take care of family and to shepherd our elders. But I am I guess we would say I'm a leadership expert, and particularly in the areas of organizational behavior and org development. And I spend my time helping pretty talented, seasoned professionals unpack some pretty complex challenges in the workplace. And I spend most of that work really focused on something that's become pretty near and dear to me, but really understanding bad boss behavior. And sort of why I got into it and sort of studied that, and has become part of my practice for a long time. So as you mentioned, I'm an author, co-host a podcast called The Access Point on Living Corporate, and a university professor. I spent a lot of time doing consulting projects across the states, helping people get out of trouble.
Yes. thank you so much for all the work that you're doing in so many facets, and also happy Caregivers Month to you, and all the caregivers out there.
Yeah.
So, tapping in. So, I love having experts on like yourself, and truly with the work that you're doing, I think we're gonna delve into, discussion of surviving bad bosses, or understanding leadership and some of those failures, because I think sometimes we love to talk about the highlight reel, of being a great leader, and those great leaders that I went to the African American Museum here in Charlotte, and I got a chance to see a lot of men of change that were great leaders, but I wonder how many times before they were acknowledged for their leadership, were there some dark moments where they felt like they failed, or that they did fail, and at one moment, no one was calling them leaders. No one was actually,
Yeah.
feeling like they were revered in their field of study, or being a change agent. So I'm sure we're going to get into some of that. I know we will. But I kind of want to take it to some of the genesis of, what was it like for you, Dr. Lonnie, entering into the workforce, when you were entering into the workforce? I know that was last year because you're so young.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah. Yeah.
um but think like preconceived notions, or what was the day-to-day life for you entering the workforce or academia?
That's interesting because I'm sort of on the maybe second, perhaps third phase of my career.
Mm,
And I was green. I think like most people are coming out of college, sort of think work is gonna be bliss. It's gonna be amazing. You're going to make lots of money and you're gonna be set on a path of fulfillment and progression, and those things just happen naturally. And I experienced my rude awakening very early that just was not the case. The first job I took out of college was amazing. I was a director I went to North Carolina first out of college, and that job ended in about 3 months. So there you go.
mm,
How's that go? Then I
yeah.
went to, I mean, so it was sort of that where it was all the things that we imagined about this oasis of the workplace in which the career could be like didn't really happen. Not without a lot of work, not without a lot of partnering, not without a lot of building relationships and unpacking things that were just pretty much unspoken. There was so
Mm,
much taboo about joining the workplace that I just didn't know. And the reason I got into this field and started not only studying organizations and organizational behavior and then working to help people improve behaviors around that is because the things I experienced, I know I would go home every day going, this can't be right.
yeah.
Right? You would leave a meeting going, I know she didn't just say that. I know he didn't just do that. I know
Hmm.
that's not what this email just said. Right. So all those things
It'd be
you're going,
like one of those moments where you're like, am I the only one seeing this? Is there cameras
right,
here?
right. Yeah. So it was that. Right. So it was how do you and I guess you talk about change agents, right? It's people that you saw in the museum. And so it was that crucible moment for me thinking, there's gotta be a better way. And it was early. I mean, I started studying organizations probably in 1999. So I was 2 years out of undergrad. I thought this is the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I know that getting that understanding, and as you saying that you were green, I think so many people, it sounds like, as you said, like you're on your third reiteration, or it sounds like you're getting closer to that retirement phase, retiring young, but when I think about that, sometimes I think it's also valuable to remember those moments, right? Because sometimes we'll get into a place, or I have gotten into a place where I have to remind myself that it always wasn't like it is today,
Yeah.
or moments like, where you kind of had to fight for these moments, or you had to, there were moments where you did not know, or you weren't included in conversations, and how did that feel? So bringing the next person up to, when I have work group meetings, asking who's not here that should be,
Mm,
versus like, just, let's get this director in, let's get this person, but who's
yeah.
not here that could add a lot of value to the
Yeah.
conversation,
Yeah.
and thinking about something that you were saying about that time period of being green and just understanding organizations. Did you have role models that did this, because for me, like my dad was a blue collar worker that made it happen, that made sure his family was taken care of. And for me, the example of going to college was my mom, because she got her master's, she went there. But I didn't see anyone navigating the corporate sphere that could lead or give me examples other than my dad of showing me hard work. Did you have role models as to what you were doing, and how to do it?
That's a great question. So I think it's a loaded question too. So yeah, there were people in my life who had successful careers, and particularly coming out of college, there were people I met who became mentors and professional guides and mentors you had sort of on campus in different offices, and you would watch the behavior they modeled, right? So I
Mhm.
remember the guy who was director of our honors program, and I watched how he operated, and I remember the conversations we had. I remember the moments he would bring me in his office and tell me sort of those sage moments: do this, don't do that, remember these things. So yes, in that regard. But were there people who were specifically taking me aside and saying, when you go into your first job, you should do X? Absolutely not. Not that they weren't out there, but there were not people who were deliberately reaching back and saying that to me. People who are deliberately showing me, here's what it's like. And then to even add more insult to injury, those were not the things you experienced when I first got into the workplace, right? People were just operating day to day without any guidance. And probably because, and I've learned this over time, they didn't have that type of guidance either. So
Mm.
people were mimicking the behavior that was set forth for them, and without proper, direct, specific guidance on how to behave with others, right? How to play nice in the sandbox, comportment, civility. Without guidance on that, people sort of do what they want, right? They improvise.
Yeah, yeah. Um, they do the best with what they have,
Exactly.
with what they have at the moment. And you brought up something that is sticking out to me is community, and it was this definition that came up about men of change. It says the streets, blocks, schools, churches, mosques, and neighborhoods that shape men of change help to write their life stories. Their ancestors formed communities to survive, and centuries later, this collective strength is one of the many reasons men find a way to thrive by building community. And sometimes, and I keep reiterating this, and this is, I guess, the what's sticking out to me in this part of my life is that, reminding myself of the people that along the way, although they may not have, as you said, directly said this is how you navigate a corporate space, they were modeling
Yeah.
behavior of how you prepare for a meeting,
Mhm.
how to
Mhm.
public speak,
Mhm.
or how to dress the part,
Mhm.
and some of those things are how to get there early. Early is to be on time. To be on
Mhm.
time is to be late. To be late is unacceptable. All
Yeah.
right. And
Mhm.
so some of those behavior, and it just makes us realize that, we are a product of our community.
Yeah.
And it was the village that helped raise us in many instances,
Yeah.
outside of mom and dad, or, it was that village as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And the village is important. And I think my work over time is now also part of holding the village accountable, right? So
Mm.
saying that it can't just be one person, one shining star in the village that is modeling the appropriate behavior. It means if there are other people who aren't modeling the appropriate behavior, somebody else in the village needs to point that out and hold that person accountable. Because
Mhm.
that is also modeling for somebody like me, somebody like you, for somebody who's listening, who's just stepping into their light, who's just stepping into their career, needs to see that when somebody colors outside of the line in an aggressive way that we don't like, here's how we bring them back. Here's how we engage with people who disrespect us. Here's how we engage with people who don't model behavior that we think is appropriate, right? So all those things are important. And where we go wrong is when we don't take the time to point out all of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You talked about accountability there, and how important that is to, I guess, bring it in and have those conversations and to talk about it. Many times that accountability, or that sense of trying to provide guidance, is sometimes in gray areas. How do you navigate when it's not explicitly written in the SOP or a policy? However, you may have a value system, that this is how we do it here. How do you navigate that when it's some of these areas are gray and they know it,
Yeah, that good old gray area.
Yeah.
and,
You've been
and
talking about
sometimes
coloring in the lines and out of it,
and sometimes it's only gray for us, right? So sometimes it's very black and white for others, but the gray is very deliberate for us.
Mm,
And that's why even when we're talking about with modeling, it is so important, because there are people who will be in your path, who will be in your village, who will show you how to show up in the gray. It's a big mama in the office, it's auntie such and such who around there. She tell you, come here, baby, let me tell you. Let me
mhm.
tell you what you just witnessed, but you didn't recognize you witnessed it, right?
Yeah,
Let me
yeah.
tell you what you just experienced. Let me tell you what they said about you when you left the room. Let me tell you what they said about you before the meeting. Let me show you what was in this email before you got invited to come to this talk. There's something very important about respecting everyone's role in the village. And what we know is
Mhm.
that the people who are most often the gatekeepers have all of the gold, right? So if it's somebody's uh, assistant, somebody's secretary, somebody's personal assistant, somebody who doesn't have a director or manager or supervisory or leadership title, but they are very well connected because they're at all the meetings because they got to take all the notes,
Yeah.
or they got to manage the calendar for two or three vice presidents. So those are the people who help you understand the gray and say, well, let me tell you what this is really about.
Mhm.
So, and I give that example because over over my career, what I've learned to do is always befriend those folks.
Come on.
But and it isn't just about friendship for the sake of my own growth, but it's about showing respect in a space and recognizing that your role is just as significant and important as my role, and that I know what I need done can't get done unless you do what you need to
Right.
do.
We have
And
to
you
have
have to get the
synergy.
things that you need, right? So we have
Mhm.
to have this reciprocal relationship. So even when I've been a change agent in multiple organizations over my career, and I typically spend the first 3 to 4 weeks going around meeting everybody. Hey, how are you? I remember one of the last places where I was director, I went to meet this guy who had a pretty big portfolio in terms of managing across the organization. And he said, you know what? Nobody in your role has ever come to introduce himself to me.
Wow.
So I've been here 20 years. You're the first person in that role, in that department who's ever come over here to meet me. So I'm glad I got to be the first. Right. But
Mhm.
those things are so significant. So I guess the short answer to your question is we can't navigate it alone. You have to find other people who are allies within the space. Sometimes it's with outside of the space, people who know that path, who know that industry, who know that organization, who know organizations like that, who can tell you, who can help you decipher the hieroglyphics, right? Who can make sense of the writing on the wall that seems so abstract to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Preach, preach. Yes, yes,
Mhm.
yes. You spoke to me. I had went to a trance for just a moment as you were speaking because it was so cathartic. Um, One of the things that you said remind me of, I guess, learning early on from my elders is to treat the janitor the same way that you would treat
Mm,
the CEO.
mhm, mhm,
There should not be a difference, and it was the same reason why when I went into the cafeteria, the lunchroom, I'm greeting everybody by name, hello,
mhm,
and
mhm.
people wondering why I have 3 pieces of chicken and they have one, you know,
Let me tell you. And so
relationship.
this comes to play out in what I do as a caregiver for my aunt too. Whenever I travel a lot for work, and so whenever I come back, and I travel internationally a lot, so whenever I come back, I always bring something for every person who runs the desk at every doctor's office that she goes to.
Wow.
All the time, I stop by. Hey, here you go. Here's this. It might be a keychain. It might be a magnet, but it's something. Every time I say, I was thinking of you, because those are the people who create space, right? If something
Yes.
happens, I need to get her to a doctor's office soon. But it's the same thing, right? Think about it in terms of organizations. You take care of those people who control access, who
Hmm.
control resources, who control information, who manage calendars, because all those things are about your village, right? And so they know when Lonnie comes in. Hey, if Lonnie calls, they recognize my number.
Yeah.
So I know if my aunt needs something, she can always get it. Right. Absolutely.
Mhm. Yes, yes, yes. Dr. Lonnie, put it down in your notepad. You just said relationship gives access.
Access.
Build that with your village, build that. I was just telling Dr. Lonnie a moment ago that I just got a new car. I haven't had a car in years because I've lived in New York City.
Mhm.
And one of the valuable lessons my dad told me when I had to take it to the service team the other day was find you an advisor, a service advisor. Let him get to know you, you get to know him, because anytime something comes wrong with your car and they see your name and number, you will get some priority, or you would get that opportunity that may not be available to others. And it brought me back to that relationship and access, like when the name comes, Mr. Oh, let me get you in, because he's had this experience. This is a 60 years plus knowledge that he's telling me. So I'm just like, all right, got it. Soak it.
Let me tell you, I've been working on this project with the University of Bahamas for about 3 or 4 years now. So I go down there pretty regularly throughout the year, and I stay at the same hotel every time. And there are 3 ladies at the front desk who help me every time, right? And I bring them gifts every time I go. So I brought my family with me the last time I went. It's my mom and my niece and my nephew. And they were like, why does everybody here know you? Or whenever you step to the desk, the manager always come over. That's exactly why. All right. She want to know what's going on with his account. Everything okay? They will take care of people, they will take care of you.
Yes, yes. Thank you for adding that. So, as an editor, contributor, author of When Leadership Fails, I know you do this in partnership with Dr. Wendy.
Yeah.
What was true when this book was published that is still true today?
Oh, that's an easy one. Okay. So let me tell you the premise of this book, right? So then that will help with what is true. We asked people to tell us the stories of the most impactful thing that happened to them at work that was terrible. Tell us the story of the thing that made you want to quit your job, leave this profession, right? That this was it. But we also asked them to then unpack that for us with the lessons we should understand today. So here was crazy. Some people told us stories of things that happened 2 decades ago as the most impactful, terrible thing that happened to them in the workplace. And what we learned through those stories is that there is a pretty much similar cycle to everything, right? It sort of starts in one place and ends in another. And you can tell the signs that it's going to be this leadership failure moment. And it typically starts with poor communication, right? And you can categorize that however you want. It might be all caps in an email. It might be not being invited to a meeting. It might be someone's communicating with your team, but not with you. It might mean somebody else is being blind copied on a message, so you don't know everybody who's connected. So it's all those things. So it starts with that, and it builds over time. And we saw this stuff, and we see that probably about the 3rd phase is that the team starts to dismantle. So you got this craziness happening with communication. Oh, I forgot this, right? So you back up from that. It begins with someone new entering the system. And we just talked about this. Because we don't always model the right behavior. Yeah. How we operate here isn't always written down in the policies and procedures. Right? So there's some cultural elements to an organization that aren't always shared equitably across. So there's always someone new who enters the space that disrupts the equilibrium. And it moves into this issue of communication. It moves into this issue of team falling apart. And then you just see it sort of dismantle altogether. So what rings true about that is, even though people were telling us stories from 10, 15, and 20 years ago, and even though that book was published 2 years ago now, I still do the same thing every day. Same thing. People sending messages to me on Instagram and Facebook saying, well, let me tell you what happened to me at work today. I don't know what you
That's how it starts.
Yeah.
Let me tell you.
Yeah. You got a minute, right? So it's that, right? But it's the same thing we've been discussing throughout this entire conversation, that so many people are disadvantaged because no one taught them how to be a good leader. And that's a real thing, right? Because most of us are promoted to leadership roles because of our competency and our area of expertise. So if you're an engineer, you get to lead under other engineers because you're a great engineer.
Mhm.
If you're an accountant, you get to lead other accountants because you're a great accountant, right? You don't get to lead other people because you demonstrated great relationship building skills, great communication
Mm.
skills, right? We aren't assessing those things. We're saying you are competent in this area of expertise. You deserve to lead the unit for that. But we haven't assessed how you engage people, how you give feedback, how you evaluate people at the end of the year, how you take criticism from others.
Yeah.
So all that still exists.
Right.
You could do
Oh.
When Leadership Fails every year and have new stories.
Aha. Got it. Drop a bomb right there. Drop a bomb right there. So is this to say, because now you I'm intrigued a little bit more. So is this why, because you're a great leader, however, you cannot build relationships, you don't demonstrate that you can be the leader of a team, or you can manage direct reports, is why these leaders are sometimes promoted, even though they have these present bad behaviors,
Yeah.
because they're good at their job, but they just
Yeah.
can't lead people.
Yeah, because people think of success in terms of productivity, right?
Mhm.
And we see that that might be revenue, right? That might mean partnerships. So there's something that's associated with some type of capitalistic view that draws you to success. That this is what we're looking for, success. We need you to meet these goals. You can meet these goals, that's fine. One of the things when we started talking, you asked me about when I was first launching into this. I recognized very early in my career that I could be successful if I built great relationships.
Yeah.
So when I've mentored other people who were coming behind me when I was in organizations, or who in other organizations who wanted to be in the path that I was in, where I was a director, I was a VP, and I would always say to them, when I was an enrollment manager, so I was to be VP for enrollment management, I said, I am a much better relationship manager than I am an enrollment manager.
Mm.
I know what it means, because I know to get this work done, to meet this goal, to meet this revenue goal, to meet this discount rate goal, to meet this head count goal, that I have to build relationships across multiple platforms to be able to make this happen. It does not rest on Lonnie Morris alone. And when you understand that, you start to operate differently. You've heard me talk about that throughout our conversations today, about the people that you meet, the people that you celebrate, the people that you bring gifts to. So when you recognize that, you navigate the space very differently. Doesn't mean you're not driven by the same goals. Doesn't mean you're not driven, but it's a relationship orientation versus a task orientation. So I know that I get tasks accomplished with people. So I focus on people, and then people will help me get any task that I need.
It's a relationship orientation instead of a task orientation. Is that what you said?
Yeah. Mhm.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. That's good. That's real good. When did so much that I'm just like in my head processing. But when we're thinking about leaders, and even thinking directly to when leadership fails, because as we know, every successful leader must fail at some point, or it's going to happen, but from your lens, what is some of the main causes of this failure that happens? I know poor communication can be some of it, or not building relationships is another, but what are some of the ones that you've seen over the years that are some of these causes?
Yeah, two stand out. Someone say toxic organizational culture, and that's loaded, right? Because
Yeah.
it may not seem toxic from the beginning. It may not seem toxic overall, but there are some things in it that tell us it's toxic. So for example, let's take the same thing on the relationship orientation versus task orientation. So a task oriented person is going to focus on task at all costs. So it might look something like this. We're in a meeting, we're not meeting our goal. I say, JR, you are not holding up your end of the bargain. And so now I'm berating you in front of the team because I'm focused on the task. The number is 100. We're only at 50. JR, that's your responsibility. And I want everybody in this room to know that I'm calling you to carpet on it, right? That's task orientation. Relationship orientation might be, let me talk to you before we go into this meeting, buddy. Hey, I know we're having some problems around this. Let's talk about, what do you need to help you meet this goal? How can I help? Is somebody else you want from the team? Can we shift some resources? Tell me what the issues are. How can I remove some barriers for you? So I'm coming to you first to have a conversation about it. And then we go to the meeting and I say, hey, JR and I talked about some of the challenges we're having. Here are the things we're going to shift. So it's not about isolating you and dogging you because of it, saying, here's what we're going to do as a team to make sure
Yeah.
we meet that, right?
Because I heard I and we. I heard we in that last.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. So we're moving that together. So, but the toxicity is in the version A, where I just come into the meeting and just start chewing you out, that
Mhm.
that's allowed, that that's okay. Nobody says anything about it. Nobody brings it up to you. The superior doesn't say that was inappropriate.
Right.
Nobody on the team feels comfortable enough saying, I don't think you should have done that. So it may not feel toxic. Everything else in the organization might feel like it's okay, but it's okay for you to berate someone in front of their coworkers, to chastise their work, even if they aren't meeting the goal, right? So there are some ways to manage getting to that. The second thing is what we talked about before is when people are not given clear instructions on how to act in situations. And we know that. We know research shows us that, practice shows us that when you don't tell someone what to do, when they're confronted with an issue, they will improvise. Another quick example is task orientation, talking about money. We have to reach this goal of $100,000, but they don't tell you how. So you've got someone over here who might say, well, hey, here's a deal I want to make for you. I'll give you additional $10,000 you need, but you got to do X for me. Or someone might say, hey, here's what I'll do is I will just shave off the top in this area right here. We'll put it into your department budget. So that way, when something else happens, I'm gonna need you to have my back, right? So now we got all these backdoor deals being cut that aren't above ground, right? There's really outside of what you think should be the norm. And that becomes how people create success. Is that your success is by making other people look bad. Your success is by taking success away from other areas. And those are things that we see when people are allowed to move in that way, because they are often frightened by what we discussed in the first example. They're frightened because I don't want to be made an example of in the meeting. I don't want to be fired because I didn't hit the goal. So all those things create this space where toxicity can live and breathe, because we aren't helping people see there's a different way, and we aren't modeling that behavior, and we aren't telling them, here's how we want you to act. It's so that might look like it's okay if you fail. We'll discuss it. We'll figure out how to make some changes, and then we'll adjust. We want you to hit the goal. We're going to do everything we can to hit the goal. We're going to support you in doing that. But we want you, when you think you're not going to hit the goal, to come and tell us so we can have a conversation about how we need to shift. I don't want you to make backdoor deals. I don't want you to pull money from other budgets. I want you to it's okay to talk to me about it, right? That's how we set a different tone.
Yeah. Very valuable. So thinking about associate X that is in this toxic environment where it's been shown that, this is how we do this here. Like we berate people in front of others, and you feel like you're empowered to actually say something about it. And you go to that leader, and that leader, well, I've always done it this way and I haven't had an issue. How do you because they're out there. They're out there where I've always done it this way. And when you look at the historical data, and they've been at the company 15 plus years, or they've been in similar roles at different companies and been promoted in them, it generally proves that they're right. They have been it this way, and they've been able to be high-fived because of it. How do you allow that associate to not continue to be dormant in what they call out, but actually feel empowered to say something?
So empowerment is tricky in this, right? Because sometimes if you feel empowered and you're mistaken, you might be the sacrificial lamb. So we don't want that. So what I typically so I'll do that. I'm okay with it, right? Where I sit in my career, I'm okay with that. But what I typically recommend is you need a coalition, right? So you can stand up to people, but you might not want to do it on your own. So it might look something like this. In a separate meeting, maybe it's a committee, or maybe there's typically HR will have somewhere you can say, hey, I don't want to put any one particular person on display, but here's how I think we might approach doing this meeting differently. I'd like to talk to some other people who might have some ideas about that, right? So now it becomes this collective sharing of ideas about how to manage the situation differently. And we create, here's the protocol that we want to use. And now it's uplifted as a standard that we adopt into our group, we adopt into our unit, rather than Lonnie said JR sucks.
Right.
So now it feels less aggressive. It feels like a shift. Even if the person who you might be identifying as wrong feels like this is partially targeted at me, that's okay, because we want them to feel accountable for it. But it doesn't put you out on a limb to be the person who's going against that person one-on-one. Because if they've been there, like you described, for 20 years, they might win that battle. So you don't have to be the solo voice, but find some people who agree with you, or at least share your values around how we should react in that way, and put forth a proposal. So that might not get you to the answer like within the week, right? Depending on the type of organization you are and how fast things navigate. But you could see something very quickly and say, hey, let's stand this up as a new way to approach things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
And if sustainability is the goal, and many times, especially for people of color or Black leaders or urban leaders, is that, you want to be here for the long haul, and you don't want this to exhaust you. So you do have to be strategic. So thank you for that strategy. Because I'm sure many people are trying to find ways, because sometimes if I see something, I'm going to say something about it, I'm going to call it out, yes, you should. But I think taking the Dr. Lonnie strategy would be the best way, because you don't want to be the sole person and then you're looked at as the aggressor every time when something comes up, they know it's you. Versus if you build this coalition and we start to, as a group, there's a we, and this is the way that we would like to see our team build or our department grow, then now as a leader, I have to actually be thoughtful in my delivery, and not be reactionary, and also how I display it.
Yeah. And that's a very inclusive way, right? That's a way to get multiple ideas involved, and it becomes how you shape it together, right? It isn't just driven by one person.
Yeah. So we understand leaders, and when I'm saying leaders, we understand that leadership, people are leaders, but sometimes they're not the best leaders. But why do leaders fail when they know how to be good leaders, or what it looks like? What are some of these symptoms and consequences of this failure?
That's a very interesting question. People are often afraid of losing something. So that might be losing reputation, losing status, losing money, losing their job. There's so many things at risk when you are charged with leading others, when you are charged with shepherding a group through a task, a team. And so if your work environment doesn't create a safe space for you to learn from mistakes and grow, doesn't mean you aren't held accountable, but those things can be very, very traumatizing. And so people start doing anything at all costs to save X, save my job, save my department, save this, because we know that your job is often associated with so many other things. So that is income, that's taking care of your family, right? And then also if you're climbing on career status, so if you're on your way to partner, if you're on the way to VP, if you're on the way to director, all these things are associated with that. So people want to preserve that and protect that at all times. So they fail when those things they're working up against start to look shaky. They start to feel insecure about that. And that's why we're dealing so much right now with wellness, right, in the workplace, and talking about how to keep people well and what that means in terms of a standard for organizations. And we even saw what the World Health Organization just came out with some stuff about it a couple of weeks ago, saying we've got to do this differently. So we're requiring all nations to think about workplace wellness differently, because that's the issue, right? People aren't well, and they are fighting against this sickness in their organization, and they don't want to get sicker, right? They don't want the terminal thing that's going to happen, which is all the things we talk about, losing all the things we talked about. So that is very, very anxiety inciting, and fear can be dangerous.
Definitely. And listening to that, and just the projecting that could happen from leaders that are afraid. What do you think of this thought? Someone told me this a while back, is that the quickest way to quiet a disruptor in an organization is to give them a title and a position. Is
I
that
love
true?
that.
Because
I
you said
love that.
something that sparked it, and as it relates to what people are up against, and you think that's true?
I don't know. I'll say I can totally understand it, right? Because you give someone a title and a position, and then the context of their work changes.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you are just JR who works on JR's work and works on JR's projects and works on JR's goals, then you're fine. But if you are Director JR, who now has 6 other people whose goals you're responsible for, you've got to coalesce them all the time. You got to move them forward. So now you got to be careful, right? There are lots of fires you got to put out. You're managing. I remember I laugh and joke with people about this all the time. There's so much involved in leading people and leading teams and leading departments that is unrelated to the job. And I remember we were having this conversation. So the last time I was running a unit, so I probably was managing 4 different operational units, maybe had 30 people across our offices. And I remember we had somebody in our office had a stalker. And we had this big unit. We probably had 30 phone lines. And the stalker was calling all the lines one by one. Went through this all day. Like, oh, he's on this line, he's on this line, he's on this line. So that's not dealing with the work. But you gotta resolve that, right? Because it's creating angst throughout the organization, throughout the unit. The person is terrified, but you gotta manage that before we can do anything else. Right? So there are always so many other things that people bring to work with them. You don't know what they're dealing with their family, what they're dealing with in their personal lives, and it spills over into it. And so, to your point, you give someone a title, give them a position that are responsible for more than just themselves. They have to think differently about how they approach stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then when you call out concerns within the organization, now if you had a certain title, you're part of that issue or concern.
Oh
You know,
yeah.
so
Oh
you have
yeah.
to speak strategically
Yeah.
about.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, they used to send out something asking like who would be the what was it emergency contact in your unit if something happened, like if we had an earthquake or something. I would never put my name. They would always put my name and send it back to me. Like I don't want to be that. Like there's enough I got to manage. If there's an
Right.
earthquake, call
I don't want to
somebody else.
assume that responsibility. Like that's me getting on Delta or any airline and like, who wants to sit in the exit row? Not me. Like,
no, ma'am, not it.
it's already enough for me to figure out if we have to do a water landing, how I'm gonna get out of here, and I gotta help everyone, all 100 of these people out. I'm sorry, I can't.
Yeah, it's a lot, right? So to your point, with title and position comes great responsibility. So it shifts how you have to operate.
Indeed, there's a shift that happens, and some people are forced into it, and they're allowed to get ready for that, while others have to be ready even before they get the role, to do that. Hello. And so when you're doing that, preparation is key for all of it, and some of it is, who teaches you how to deal with the stalker, right? Some of it's situational, right? You're learning in the moment. You're like, who teaches?
So we're laughing about it right now because that was what 15 years ago.
Yeah.
But on that day, it was crazy. Like, what do you mean? The phones just would not stop ringing all day long, one by one more. I'm like, how did he get all the numbers to the
how?
It's craziness. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I know that you're someone that has been remote for many years now. So remote
way before the pandemic.
Right. So this is new to many of us. I've seen people, and I thought it was such a luxury that they could work from home or work from anywhere prior to 2020. But in 2020, it became a reality for many people that worked in the corporate sphere. Is that like, hey, pack up your things. I remember March 13th, or maybe it was the 14th. And like, hey, you're going home early. I actually had a friend in town from Louisiana, and we hung out all weekend. We're like, oh, I don't have to go to work Monday, so might as well let's go in. We were out every day, right? And then when it was time to get back to work, then what was tough was that, not only did I have COVID and double pneumonia that started to creep in that week because I had a good old time, right? I was out amongst the wretched, doing the wretched, as they would say on the Cosby Show. So I was out just living life that weekend. But what we thought was going to be a week or 2 weeks, or maybe 1 or 2 days, is honestly, I thought it was just a 1 or 2 day thing, turned out to be over a year.
Yeah.
Over 2 years. And many companies started earlier this year returning back to the office, while some assumed the hybrid work model, right? So as many corporations are navigating their return to office initiatives, and many employees, they're apprehensive because guess what, now I don't have to deal with those microaggressions that come with being in the office. I don't have to deal with the
Except via
politics,
email.
right? I don't have to deal with, right? It's a different space, that you don't have to deal with it, or even navigating corporate while Black. It's different. Now you're in your comfortable zone, your space. You're still having to navigate it, but you're learning how to do it remotely, or you learn how to do it in this environment. So many associates are apprehensive because of their mental well-being. They don't want to sit in traffic in most metropolitan cities for 2 hours just to get to the office, to undock their laptop, to dock it back in, to do what they could have did at home. So what do you tell the leaders that are thinking about navigating back to the return to office on more of a full-time scale, so that they don't, I'm going to call it an F on the report card as it relates to the RTO policy? What should they be considering, or who should they be considering as they work on this initiative?
This is a big thing, right? Because people are battling this, and there are multiple places. We're seeing what's happening with Twitter right now, and a bunch of other spaces going around about it. So one is to acknowledge that the world of work has changed, and it has changed forever, and it will continue to evolve. We are not the same workforce that we were in 2018, right? In 2019. Everything from 2020 going forward has just been learning on the go, learning on the fly, figuring it out. And I'd say everyone needs to give themselves some grace in this, because you mentioned this already, that sometimes there are things happening, you don't even realize that it's a thing until you're in the midst of that. And so someone who may have seemed really excited about coming back to the office full time may get back to the office full time and realize, I'm not particularly happy with being in the office full time. So I think employees and leaders and managers and organizations need to give themselves some grace on figuring out, how do we do this, and how do we continue to make sure that it works, because it might also create some pain points for the organization that they hadn't really thought through. We need extreme flexibility in this, and that's not in just the general sense that we talk about flexibility, but this is one of those areas where one approach does not fit all.
Yeah.
And we can see that within one unit, right? One division, where this person who's sitting next to you in the office might only come 2 days a week, where you come 4 days a week. Mm-hmm. And that could be by choice, for whatever reason is. Well, perhaps my son goes to a school that's over here and I need to drop him off. So it makes much more sense for me to drop him off at school and stay here rather than go back home, right? So there's so many things that we don't even know to recognize. And so having the comfort level to accommodate people within reason to their own level of comfort, right? What helps with that? The other thing, I think, as you get into some of the, what does it mean to be Black at work and how do we navigate all those things, is it is okay, and this is something I've been saying to organizations since we've been dealing with this, that it is okay for people not to feel comfortable with their camera on.
Yeah.
Right? That's a personal space thing. Sometimes you don't know, there's some trauma that I'm experiencing from this person who's might not be in my office, it's in another office. And seeing that person on camera is going to really cause some problems for me. So I'd rather just listen in, contribute where I can, but not look directly at people and have them looking directly at me. So it's something different where you should be able to have that sort of space that we didn't always used to have when you had to go into the office and you had to be face to face with people. You had to sort of deal with those things. So I would say we've got the technology that allows us to do things a little bit differently. Because you don't see someone's face on camera does not mean they are not contributing wholly. Does not mean they're not engaged wholly. Now, what we do see is that people are often multitasking, but we expect that anyway, right? People are multitasking at their desks. Right. I'm sitting in meetings with people who are writing notes and texting about things, right? And stepping out because they got to get a call because their secretary is calling about something. So don't act like multitasking is the bad word. That's not it. So this individual customized flexibility is what's really, really important here. The other thing is, I'd say everyone needs to think about sort of the rules of engagement. And that can be, as we talked about before, you can develop that within your work group, right? I always tell people, you deal with anything dealing with teams, we always say start with creating what is your team charter, right? How do we operate? How do we solve problems? How do we communicate? When we can't get what we need from somebody in this group, how do we handle that? And so we write those things out. So we all know what the rules are. You should be doing the same thing as it relates to remote work and hybrid work. How do we function? What do we want the rules to be? How do we call things out? How do we make changes and recognize that in this idea of flexibility and comfort, that it should evolve, right? That technology is changing around it, expectations are changing around it, the workflow changes. So you should be able to adjust it as you see fit for the needs that you have within your organization. Those are the important things. The rest of it, I think some of that stuff still carries over, right? So you might not be dealing with microaggressions in your face, but they're gonna find a way.
Yeah.
They're gonna find a way.
Yeah. No, that's valuable. I didn't think about that. The trauma triggering if you've seen a person that maybe you are working through an opportunity, I'll call it an opportunity with, and how that could trigger someone. Thank you. That's very valuable.
It just happened to me just last week. Can't be on this call. Click. Thanks. Bye.
Yeah.
I won't do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Because when I was thinking about it, like the need to be off camera, yes, we do have the virtual backgrounds, but I was thinking about some of those people that may not have the, in their eyes, the business setup, and you start seeing the inequities with people's living conditions, right? Yeah. And so I was like, hey, that's more than enough reason for you to turn your camera off. But I didn't think about that that opportunity that you shared.
Yeah.
So, all right. As we're kind of coming to a close here, because so many gems, right? So many gems you've been dropping, but I want more gems. Hey, I'm here for the people. I know you out there want some more gems too. Like our notepads are filling up, and I know you've done a lot of work around this, and you can probably even share more that you've just wrapped up. But as it relates to professionals, whether you're young, tenured, senior, whatever state you may be in, you're going to come across a boss, whether it's a good boss that you can celebrate on Boss's Day or a bad boss. But right now, I want to talk about the bad boss. What are some tips you have for surviving a bad boss so that you can have a working relationship or, sustain to outlive them at the company?
Yeah. That's good. I love this question. So here's what I always think first. First thing is ask them what is most important to you. Give you an example. When I was a senior executive at an organization, and we used to have these three goals, right? And they all had numbers associated with them. And sometimes just the context of what was happening, it was difficult to meet all three because it required this jockeying. So you very talented people can do it. And I did it multiple times. But there were some times I'm like, I'm not sure. But what I would ask, tell me which of these is most important to you. Rank them in order for me. So if I get you, like, so it's 2 or 3, tell me which 2 you must have. So if I got to sacrifice one, then I know which one I can sacrifice. So then we already know up front. If anything goes wrong, I know I have some wiggle room here. Well, I'm going to still try to get all 3, but I know I have some wiggle room. So I know here are the things that make that are important to you. So if I get these 2, you already know I was going to sacrifice it, so we're okay, right? So we don't always go in and ask the person that might be demonizing our work or attacking our work, or just maybe not as communicative as we want, or maybe not giving us the type of feedback we want. We don't ever go in and ask, tell me what it is that you need. And that's something that's so important for all of us. Tell me what you need. And if I can provide what you need, can I be okay in the other areas? So that's one. I would say always ask that. Yeah. Number 2, find a way to communicate that supports both of your styles, your professional styles. So it might look something like this. So maybe the best way to communicate with the boss that's not so good to you isn't the one-on-one meeting. Perhaps a better way might be, well, rather than meet, why don't we do this? How about I send you a written update on this day on Mondays, everyone. So I'll give you, here's what I did, here's what I'm going to do next, here's where I need your help, right? So this is a way to invite the person in, but it takes it out of this one-on-one that can be really contentious, where you might feel uncomfortable and where he or she feels more empowered. If you're just sharing and you agree on the things we need to share, now you can get some feedback, right? And particularly with asking your boss for action. In this case, I'm saying, here's where I need your help. Here's the barrier I need remove. That way they are involved and invested in your process differently, and they'll help navigate that differently. I'd say the third thing is take one for the team sometimes, right? And so we learn that over the years in multiple contexts of how to do that. And that might just mean something as simple as, typically, if there's a boss that you don't like, there are other people who don't like that person too. Like, this person isn't always just the bad boss to you. It might be several other people, it might be across your whole department. Like, we don't really like her. We don't like him. We don't like how they act. You might be the person that shows up one day and just brings the boss a card. Simple. Might cost you 65 cents at Walmart. Might cost you $5 at the Hallmark store. You might just say, hey, you know what? This reminded me of you, and that's it. That's a way to break the ice differently. That's a way to shift the thinking. That's a way to shift the environment that creates a different type of interaction and engagement, right? So it isn't always so contentious. And it might not be the thing that works and tips the scale for you, but at least says, this is somebody who thinks about me differently than just this thing at work. Because, like we mentioned earlier, you never know what that person is up against. So often, either the way you're being treated has been modeled for him or her by others, right? So they were treated that way from their boss, or they might be being treated that same way now. So the person who is her superior or his superior is always barking down his throat. So figure out those little things. Those can help you sort of survive in the space longer and at least keep some of the heat off your back.
Thank you. And that thank you is times 3 because I know there's someone else out there that needed that as well. So thank you for enriching us on today and for sharing those gems with us. And, you know, what it reminded me of when you were sharing that is that we're not exempt from any of this. You know, we're going to experience it whether it's now or later, you know, as it relates to leadership, you know, bad leadership, bad bosses, you know. However, in order for us to build relationship, you know, and to navigate through this, we have to recognize that we also have a part in this. Yeah. You know, especially if we have a goal and that goal is for us to climb the ladder, or maybe your goal is not to climb the ladder, but maybe your goal is to be productive. Right. You know, to actually enjoy the work that you do. Yeah. You know, you also have a part to play in this, and you also have to make sure that you're intentional with that.
Very intentional.
Yeah. Is there something, I want to give you this opportunity before we go into our lightning round?
Okay.
I want to give you the opportunity. Is there something that we did not talk about, or I did not ask, that maybe you just want to share? And it's like, it could be unrelated, you know, to anything that's here, that you just want to put it out here in the atmosphere on the Butterfly Chamber.
Well, I don't know. I think we hit on so many good things, but I'll say this, because with our podcast, The Access Point, I get people who hit me up all the time who say, yo, that was so great, and I want to share it with people in my job. I'll share it with my boss, but I'm afraid X. I'm afraid she thinks, because we are really, really sort of seductive in the titles we use, right? So we did an episode called I Think I Hate My Boss, right? We just did an episode called This Job Makes Me Sick, right? So people are like, the information is good, but I'm afraid if I share that work, I'm gonna get fired. So so what I want to say is, there is value in information, right? In that you can create a space to share information, to collaborate around things, so that you don't have to feel that fear. It might look something like, and this is about all the resources we're saying to help people navigate this stuff. It might look like something like saying, hey, why don't we have a reading circle in our team, right? And everybody contributes some things they think could be really cool. And you might not submit, speaking to the access point, you might not submit that episode called I Think I Hate My Boss. You might just send a link to the podcast itself and let people navigate through the things themselves, right? So I would say don't forget how important knowledge sharing is in all of this, that we are sharing knowledge right here, sort of our curated experiences, but there are other resources that you can tap into all the time that help you build. And just like you said, somebody might listen to this, somebody next to you might go, yo, I really needed that today. Yeah. So don't be stingy.
Yes, don't be stingy.
Stingy.
You heard Dr. Lonnie. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We're going to take a pause so we can refresh, do a little bio break, and then we're going to be back with the lightning round with Dr. Lonnie Morris Jr. All right, we are back, and this is the Butterfly Chamber Lightning Round with Dr. Lonnie Morris Jr. And I gotta say the junior because he is. All right, so the lightning round is gonna be a question. It might just be a statement, and you have maybe choose yes or this, but you have to answer the question, and it can be one sentence or two sentences, but that's it. It should not be a paragraph.
Okay.
Give me a quick response. All right.
Let's see.
Let's do this. So your first question is, cue the music. What do you know now about life that you wish you could tell the younger you about your health and your wellness?
Cut back on salt and sugar.
Boom. What are you working on these days? What are you reading or listening to?
So listening to is easy. So I play soca mixtapes from all day long. So that's what I listen to all day. And then I'm just finished reading. Actually, I'm sorry. I'm reading this book right here about how to deduct some more taxes.
Come on now.
So lowering your taxes.
Health is wealth. I got it.
So that's really it. Yeah. What was the other part of it?
You answer both.
Okay.
Quiet quitting.
Absolutely. Loud quit. You can quiet quitting forever. Keep going.
And as Dr. Luddy has shared on the access point, quiet quitting is not a new phenomenon. It has been happening for a long time. Okay. What would you name this episode if you had to give it one of your seductive or provocative names from the access point?
Wow. That's a hard one. That's not in my job description. Right? Because the job description never says anything about building relationships. Never says anything about, right, nurturing people. It just say all tasks, right? That's it.
I love that. I love that. All right. And the last lightning round question is not even a question. It is this. Thanksgiving.
Family with no salt or sugar.
Or sugar. Come on now. Dr. Lenny, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure to learn. I learn every time we encounter. Every time, even if we're having fun and just enjoying life, because life is meant to be enjoyed, or we're having these moments where you're pouring out, and I have my cup ready to be filled. Just fill it up. But I know we all
libations for everyone.
Yes. Pass it around. Please let everyone know where they can find you or be in touch with you, and be an accomplice to your journey.
Absolutely. So Lonnie Morris on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Easy.
Boom. Thank you again. Thank you. This high five is for you. And before we leave you today, we have a inspirational quote, your Inspire Me quote. I'm going to give one. I'm going to look at Dr. Lonnie and see if he has one.
I have one.
Okay.
You go first.
All right. Your quote for today is: "We can't control what happens to us, but we can choose how we respond to it."
Mm,
And
I'll take
yours
that.
is?
So mine is much less profound, but I think equally as seductive, since we're going seductive theme. There is this song I listen to all the time, and it came out probably in 2012. One of my favorite artists, Kelly Price, on the album Kelly. And the song is called Get Right or Get Left. Right. I think that applies not just in interpersonal relationships, but also with jobs. Talk about quiet quitting. People are saying, do things the way, meet the expectations, or I'm moving on.
Boom. Get right or get left.
Get right or get left.
All right. Y'all go home and try that tonight if y'all want to. And you might need to. Hey, I'm not in your business. All right. Thank you all so much. This has been the Butterfly Chamber with J.R. McDonald, and I am so excited for all that is to come. So stay tuned. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Deuces.
It's the Butterfly Chamber with J.R. McDonald.